Hello, I'm football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Foot Weekly Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to week 11 of the Foot Weekly Podcast. This is a gameplay episode, and yeah, looking forward to this one because a significant change has happened to the game. Some people are excited. I think actually generally people are excited. We'll get into that. But first of all, we have Josh Excels. Are you excited?
Yeah, I'm so excited. I posted in the Discord the other day the GIF of Thanos sitting down. My work here is done, kind of thing. I've really hated keeper movement. I would suggest maybe it's gone a little far in the patch, but that's maybe something we can get into.
Timed finishing, it's like that. Was it that meme of the Grim Reaper going between the doors? Time finishing.
But there'll be some people who think I'm coming for all of the skill gap mechanics in the game. And that's I want manual passing. So if you're talking about someone who wants a skill gap, I am right here. So
well, you could say that maybe the sort of manual skill gap isn't in the right places. But yes, we'll introduce our next guest, who is, of course, the man behind many a great guide around FC 26 and many previous FC and FIFA games. It's NealGuides. Hello, welcome back.
Good to have me on. Good to be back again. Been some time. Actually, no, when was the last time we did? I think
it was like
a few weeks ago, I think.
It was a little while ago, actually. Yeah.
It was October, actually,
yeah.
Time flies, I suppose.
I like the way you said "good to have me on" because actually, it's good. It is good to have you on. So, that's nice. But yeah, let's dive into it. And I guess start with what we were alluding to before, which is basically that goalkeeper movement has been nerfed significantly, I guess is what you'd say about it. But I don't know. Is it too far to say, Neil, that goalkeeper movement is pretty much pointless? Obviously, from set pieces and things like that, it's different. But in open play, would you say that goalkeeper movement is kind of pointless now?
So I actually like goalkeeper movement, but the thing is, when I say I like goalkeeper movement, finishing has to be good, and I felt like it needed a slight nerf, but I felt it just went way too far. And I think now it's, apart from maybe from a corner or from a set piece, as you said, I don't think I'm moving the goalkeeper that much unless I'm 1000% sure it's like a finesse shot. But even then, it's like you're moving it, it's so lethargic, you don't really get the movement in time. So I would say it's probably pretty much useless now. Probably done.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, Josh. It's so slow to move. And I just, in a one-on-one situation, it just felt like the goalkeeper's going to move too late to actually have an impact. I'd maybe say you might use it when you think the goalkeeper can cover a spot that your players aren't covering in the build. When a player's trying to get a shot off around players or something, you could maybe move the keeper if you've got a bit of time to one of the posts just to cover a likely angle. But even then, it does feel like very, very slow.
Yeah, the way that it felt like it was being used before was more of like a move to save. So, you would kind of, as someone was taking a shot, you would move them across the goal where you think they were going to shoot to then save the shot. Whereas now it's more of like, where do you want to position them? You have to move them like at least a second or two before the shot's coming. And as you say, it's like, if you've got a player who's marking the shot to the near post, you can still move them across. The speed with which they move, though, means it has to be done in advance. You can't move them like when the shot's being taken. And I've seen a lot of people say, it's just an auto goal when you shoot now. And it's not. I've played lots of games where people are missing shots, and now it feels more like shooting is back to being the skill gap. Are you a good shooter or a bad shooter in those situations? Can you take your chances? And there's been some games where people are scoring lots of goals, absolutely, but I don't know. I think in a game that's so difficult to break people down, I don't know that it's a bad thing that you should have like a better chance of scoring if you create a good chance. I don't know. So yeah, as someone who never really used keeper movement that much before, I'm obviously happy with the change, but I've noticed like how much worse keeper movement is and like how much slower it is. And it's interesting that they've been able to do it in certain situations, because moving the keeper out of the corner feels like exactly the same speed. Like they still move out that quickly. Rush outs, like holding triangle, still feels the same speed. It's just that lateral, flick in of the stick that's where it feels like I'm noticing the biggest changes.
Yeah, it is so, to me, noticeable how much worse it is. And I think I was thinking about this, and I was like, I think that if I had a centre back with block plus in goal, that would be more effective than moving the keeper. As in, if I wanted to actually block a specific part of the goal, I think that would be more effective than just moving the keeper as it currently is, which, I don't know, feels a little bit weird. I kind of wonder whether they should have just taken it out in open play to be a bit more honest about what they were doing. But I guess they don't necessarily know. Well, they kind of should know. I don't know, Neil. I guess like that kind of raises the point, like, are you happy with how this has gone, or do you feel like they basically saw a poll which said, quite clearly, to be fair, we don't want goalkeeper movement, and then they just removed goalkeeper movement? Because although it still, as we're saying, it works, it isn't really like going to be a factor in gameplay, I think, anymore.
I mean, it's an interesting one. I personally feel like the AI defensive nerf, I thought that was going to come out with this patch. I feel like they should have done it after. That would have made more sense. There's a lot of indirects that patches do, and maybe you could argue at this moment of time it'll make the game more defensive, and people will be less likely to concede now. They don't have that last ditch save with goalkeeper movement. Look, I think it needed to be nerfed. I think, look, finishing was in a good state, but I felt like it needed to be nerfed just a little bit. But I feel like they didn't need to obliterate it into the ground. In fact, normally when they nerf something, they do very little nerfs, or they change very little. But this one, they went complete extreme. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't mind too much. It doesn't really affect me that much, especially on precision shooting. But truthfully speaking, I do feel like there's some skill with using teammate contain, blocking the near post angle, and moving the goalkeeper. Just like in real life, you know, if your defender's covering one angle, a goalkeeper would sidestep to the left or to the right. And I feel like you can't really do that anymore. People will disagree, but that's one thing. So I think maybe they just went way too extreme, I think. And I think maybe not all, even like these polls, like, you know, I was talking about this earlier, like, how do people know if it's goalkeeper movement or is it rush out? These polls are so ambiguous. There's no videos that show what they're referring to. It's just like, it's like saying, how should we fix shooting? Should it be better or worse? But like long shots inside the box. So I just thought that was a really bad perspective, voting wise anyway.
Yeah, I think there's probably a broader conversation we can have about patches. We had a question about it, actually, or a comment about it, so we can maybe get onto that in a second. But just to kind of continue the conversation around what the goalkeeper movement patch means. I mean, for some people, this may not have a huge impact on them. I mean, I guess, you know, if you weren't doing goalkeeper movement, this can only be a good thing, really, for your gameplay, because essentially your opponent's just had a tool removed and you should find it easier. I mean, I guess now well, the one thing to remember is the goalkeeper movement isn't in the game, so you don't need to compensate for it. And you can just, you know, think about where I should be putting the ball when the keeper is in its default position, which will, you know, maybe take a little bit of time for people to get used to some extent. And I guess, you know, if we can kind of think about what this might mean, I guess, for goalkeepers in the game, do we think that this will change people's approach to choosing goalkeepers? Do we think that, you know, the choice of play styles might change? Because, you know, I guess people were making quite a lot, or at least people I played were making a good amount of saves using goalkeeper movement, and now they're going to have to maybe look to the goalkeeper themselves to make the save rather than them assisting the goalkeeper making the save. So yeah, Neil, do you think there's going to be a new meta in terms of goalkeeper choices, for example?
I mean, I still think footwork is probably the most important play style. I think, statistically speaking, anyway, if you were to choose a goalkeeper, I think over the whole weekend leagues, footwork probably save you the most, especially at New Evo footwork playstyle plus. But I tried to go with footwork, far reach as well, which I think maybe might be a bit more important, you could argue. I've not really tested it, but I normally go with those two and then at least 6'2", 6'3". So I don't think the choice would change per se, but maybe just the way people approach the defending with the goalkeeper. If that makes sense. Maybe it might push you more now on the outside because they know with goalkeeper movement, or it depends. It's actually an interesting one, to be honest. I mean, I've not really thought about it too much. How would I just kind of, you just play nonchalantly without thinking, right? But it's actually a good point. I'm not too sure, but I don't think in general the gameplay will change or the goalkeeper choice will change from that perspective.
Interesting. What do you think, Josh? Are you thinking about goalkeepers differently at all now?
Yeah, well, I think Neil raises an interesting point that I think it might change more the other side of the ball, like who you choose in terms of shooting, rather than necessarily who you're choosing in terms of your goalkeeper. But I wonder if we'll see rush out as a play style become a little bit more popular, just because that the ability now to close the space to tighten the angle as a normal goalkeeper would in real life, rather than take 3 steps across to the right and not try and close down the angle at all. That now is kind of your only real defense that you can do quickly. The ability to like move the keeper up and then allow them to try and bait a chip shot. There's maybe an argument now as a base play style. People might start looking for that, but I think it is still footwork and far reach. I've seen a lot of people enjoying finesse shot. There's a leak that we're getting a 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 SBC that has finesse shot plus, and there's a big debate over whether people prefer finesse shot plus or low driven plus. I think as long as you've got a combination of the two, it's the low driven finesses which are the absolute killer at the moment. So I think, I just wonder if now as an attacker, if we'll see a little bit more of that switch towards low driven from finesse, because I now there is, I think most people were using keeper movement to counter that low driven across the box. Like that tended to be where you would see most of those saved when it was obvious that it was coming, and it's the keepers don't save it if you don't move them. So I just wonder if it'll be people's shooting habits, maybe not the players they choose, but more of their shooting habits that will change. I found it interesting, the kind of, I'm not sure there's been a gameplay topic that's quite as divisive as this, that we know is in the game anyway. Let's leave it at that. I think there's maybe an argument that no one really knows how this is going to affect the game in the long term. In fact, even just the day the patch came out, I saw tweets after people who played the first 2 games saying this is horrible. This is going to like play into the hands of all of the meta rats who are like doing drop back AI and all of that kind of stuff. And then those same people at the end of the day went, sure, I actually quite like it. It's like we do need to let some of these changes marinate a little bit. I think they've gone very extreme with this. And I would have liked to have seen a live event that had no goalkeeper movement in. I think it's something I spoke about when we first talked about it, so that we could just see what it was like. Give people, 4 or 5 days in that live event to go, oh, we do like this. You could check, are the scorelines looking ridiculous? Is there like a shooting angle that just becomes, really overpowered? Is there a certain method that breaks if people can't move their keeper? Like that, and then take that data, and then that can go into, okay, well, how much of a fix are we going to go for? But that's not what happened. I will say, like, from my perspective, I don't understand the logic that this benefits people who use dropback AI more than it does the people that are trying to attack more, because I feel like those that aren't controlling defenders tend to be the ones that move their keeper more often than not, because they're not having to concentrate on which way their defender's moving, because they're not controlling them, or they're kind of a little bit less stressed defensively because they're not switching between lots of players trying to cut passing lanes. It's just like, well, I'm holding my defensive midfielder and I'm just sprinting him around wherever the ball's going. And
well,
so
also there's the fact that actually because you've got a set defense and they're blocking off angles, they'd often move the keeper to compensate for the blocking player so that they can cover both sides of the goal or whatever. I agree. I feel like I see goalkeeper movement more often when I'm playing against someone who drops back and plays quite deep or isn't very aggressive, AI defends, than people who don't do that. And I think that's a good point. Also, because you can still rush your keeper out now, like, quite effectively. So when you're countering, which is less likely against someone who's going to be really like deep, that actually is still going to be an effective way to defend counters, the rush out versus goalkeeper movement, which is kind of not even like that clear of rushing out. And actually, sorry, I've interrupted you, but I did want to make the point that in terms of goalkeeper play styles, I wanted to echo your point about rush out. I think it's going to be really, really effective now. I think basically in terms of one-on-one situations, it was already pretty good, but now it's going to be pretty much the only way that you can really impact the opponent. Things like dummying your goalkeeper charge and all that kind of stuff, I think is going to be effective. Sometimes you can even like rush out, like if a player has rush out plus, like I was using Alisson, you can like rush out in the box really effectively, like when your defense is relatively static and suddenly the angle is closed down. And I was, I think is it 𝘵𝗫𝗍𝗫, the French PSG goalkeeper?
Yeah.
He's one of the only goalkeepers people use with both rush out and footwork, I think. And you can really tell, like, he's so good in those situations. He's just got the base play style. So I would take a look at the Evos that are out at the moment. And I think we have Evos that add rush out, footwork plus. We don't have anything that adds rush out, but obviously some goalkeepers already have that. We have an Evo, if you did the 𝘭𝑪𝑖𝑐𝗱𝗰𝗀𝘀 objective, that adds the base far reach play style, which is nice. So the combination of those two, I think, will set you up with quite a decent goalkeeper. Obviously nice if you can get some decent reactions on the goalkeeper too. But sorry, yeah, let's go back to talking about, you know, who it was helping this patch. And I think you were saying not really so much the drop back players as people would think.
Yeah, and I think maybe there's an element of what you were saying there with, if you think about the like if you're defending a counter attack, because you're defending a counter, there's usually more space in the box. So even if you were someone who was using keeper movement on the counter, that's where someone has time to delay the shot, wait for you to move the keeper, and then hit it in the other side. Whereas when someone's got that like drop back defense and there's 8 players in the box, if you try and delay your shot, the chances are there's going to be an AI tackle thrown in by the time you've then hit the shot after the keeper movements happen. So for me, I don't know that there's necessarily specifically one player that this is more beneficial for, but I certainly wouldn't say it benefits people who play more drop back than others. I don't see that. I mean, obviously, the people who it benefits is those who don't use keeper movement, which is me, which is why I'm probably a little happier about this than others.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually, have used goalkeeper movement. It's definitely won me some games, but equally, it's lost me some games when my opponent's done it. So I feel quite like neutral on this. It's like, okay, maybe it's good because it's one less thing to think about. I think it's interesting in terms of maybe if we move this on slightly, Neil, talking about precision shooting. Obviously, that was actually quite a good, effective way of maybe beating a keeper when they've been moved. But actually, I think that in a lot of situations, goalkeeper movement was the only way to save a precision shot, because some of them are just so good, especially if you add the play styles into the mix as well. Whereas now we're in a situation where I feel like precision shooting, like it's essentially going to be down to you to beat the AI keeper, and you should be able to most of the time if you're in a decent position, because precision shooting is pretty strong. So yeah, how do you think it's going to play out for kind of shooting moving forward?
So this is what I was talking about earlier. I feel like a lot of it could mean a more defensive game, because let's say you did use goalkeeper movement to bail you out, you don't have that anymore. So now you're going to be thinking twice about what you're doing, because when someone goes in behind, it could be a goal. The problem that I have is if someone moves the goalkeeper, you can still go near post. So, you know, it's only, let's say if you're not patient, but let's say you went far post one time. The second time you could go near post if you're going to expect the goalkeeper movement again. So that's why I think with precision shooting, goalkeeper movement wasn't as much of an issue as I think it was, me personally speaking, because finishing was quite good. The issue was mainly if you're aiming at the center of the goal. So if you're asking me, like with precision shooting, I think at this point now, I think it's really worth using. I mean, like the first time shots have not really been nerfed. So, and that's another way where goalkeeper movement, because at least when someone's doing a first time shot, I would try to block the pass, or I try to move a defender in front. But if I can't, at least I can go with the goalkeeper and then try to block one angle out. Well, I can't do that anymore. So I expect, for example, in the next few weeks, so like first time shots going in everywhere, and I can't even stop it. But I think precision shooting is, I wouldn't say you have to do it, but I think it's very much in your favor to learn precision shooting. I think anyone Division 5 and above, I think it's worth trying. I think Division 3 and above, you should be using it, but only don't use it. Let's say if you know you panic, and let's say you get inside the box and you tend to shoot early around the penalty arc, or you feel like you get frustrated inside the box, I don't think it's worth using. But if you're a good left stick dribbler and you already don't panic inside the box, I think it's definitely a good time to give it a go. Just try it now. You might lose a few odd games in the first few times trying to get used to it, but just go into the arena, just do a lot of practicing. But maybe you can even argue you don't even need it actually with goalkeeper movement. So it's an interesting one. I think as long as you do a low driven, or if you do a low driven shot with a play style or finesse shot with a play style, I don't think you need it, personally speaking, with this patch. But if you're looking for any generic player without the playstyle pluses and you're not doing those shot types, then I think it's very much in your favor to use precision shooting.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just, not like, I don't know. Basically, my experience after this patch has been that I just basically always score power shots with players with decent shooting. Is it not power shots, the playstyle, but like a regular laces shot? They are so consistent now that I think it's quite interesting. Because obviously before, sometimes the opponent would move the keeper and that would get in the way of that shot. But it felt like that was the only way that my opponent was stopping a laces shot, within the penalty area that was in an okay position. And now, those are just going in so consistently that, interestingly, it feels to me like there's been a bit of a shift away from shooting playstyles. Those are still really, really good. I'm not taking anything away from them. There's clearly a level above. You can take shots from certain angles, which you can't take a power shot from, obviously, because that's what finesse and low driven allow you to do. But I do think, interestingly, this has shifted the power just slightly towards regular shots, because they are really quite good, or were already really quite good, but now you can't use the keeper movement to stop those. So I think that's probably something to kind of consider if you're wondering about using precision, and you kind of aren't convinced, then maybe think actually, am I taking regular shots which are getting saved? Because actually, I think with precision, it feels to me quite unlikely that those shots are getting saved, at least in my experience since the patch. But yeah, I don't know whether anyone would agree with that, but certainly in my experience so far.
Yeah, I mean, as I've said a few times, I think I've dabbled using precision and not using precision. There's been times with goalkeeper movement, I think it was one of the main reasons I was trying not using precision shooting, because it meant I didn't need to aim. I could just kind of switch the side of the goal I was shooting at a lot quicker without having to be precise with where I was aiming. One thing in fact, it was someone I know who goes 15-0 pretty much every weekend, who uses precision shooting. One of the things that they've done is to take off the aim, take off the little line that you get on precision shooting, and it said it's made him way more effective with it, because when you have the line, you tend to try and perfect where you're shooting rather than kind of just go with your instinct, which is probably going to be pretty good. I think it's good as a bit of a trainer to let you know where you're aiming, but that line tends to also come from the center of the player rather than the center of the ball. And sometimes that line can be, maybe a foot off from where you actually end up hitting the ball. So I've tried it. I've not used it enough to say whether it's definitely better or worse, but I haven't felt myself be much worse without having that line there. But I think now, if you don't have it on, I really think you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. I mean, just the speed that shots are hit at it just feels quicker on precision shooting. The ability to hit a shot on the weak foot, if you do use assisted shooting, the number of times you will have hit a shot that has no power behind it, that just kind of rolls towards the keeper, or you think it should be a complete open goal and it ends up being kind of saved. If you put it on precision shooting, I promise you will get to a point where those go in every single time, and the number of times you miss because of precision shooting will just drop dramatically. Now, there is a potential with what's happened with keeper movement that there becomes a shooting angle where if you're unassisted, it's just a goal every time. And so it may be that there's then a little bit of a shift back the other way. But I mean, for right now, I'm glad I've not lost my precision shooting ability, because it feels like an extra weapon that I think some people have maybe moved away from.
Yeah, and I was actually going to say, this is something that I was going to sort of mention, is we can only talk about this patch as of a day or so of its existence. And I think the biggest concern for me in not having goalkeeper movement is the fact that essentially, if certain angles are found that are super effective, and yeah, maybe that's assisted. I mean, it could also be precision angles as well. Either goalkeeper movement was a way that people could stop OP shots without EA needing to patch them. And that is a concern because, yeah, we could see that. We could see people finding those angles and then not have a mechanic to deal with it. And I thought maybe they would retain the same level of goalkeeper movement when you're outside the box, so that if there were like long distance OP angles, those could be accounted for at least. But yeah, they haven't done that, and it's slow from everywhere, which is a bit rough. So yeah, we'll have to see how things develop on that front. But yeah, good points on precision. I think, yeah. Actually, I was going to say, I think the big thing I would just end this with is saying, if you get frustrated with shooting unassisted, you should definitely try precision, because I think it's the best thing for like feeling like you actually have control over what you're doing when you're shooting. And I think whether you find it significantly more effective or not, you'll find it less frustrating. And at least when you're frustrated, you're probably getting frustrated with your own aim rather than the game, which I think is probably a good thing. And yeah, it's a good point about like actually the fact that I think when I was missing, if I was ever missing shots on precision, it was probably because I was last minute accounting for goalkeeper movement. Rather, you know, obviously in some situations you do sometimes miss anyway, but those are probably the more common ways to miss. So it does make it a bit easier potentially. So yeah, is there anything else kind of on this patch that we think we should cover? I mean, we've talked about the playstyles, goalkeeper kind of meta shifts potentially, although it doesn't seem like that's going to be huge. There was one other point on the patch I think you wanted to make, Neil, and it seems like potentially the drag back is a little bit quicker, and maybe that's something people want to try.
Yeah, I mean, well, I felt that I've not used it that much. I used it a bit. I've mainly been testing out goalkeeper movement, but the drag backs felt much faster. I know they said it's after the transition speed with another skill move, but I felt like the drag back itself was fast. I felt like there was like a frame or so when you bring the ball back, and I can imagine a half drag back. When you bring the ball back, the game used to kind of freeze there and then it would go. But I feel like they kind of removed that frame, so the drag back feels fast. I mean, I like the drag back. Maybe you can argue FIFA 18 style where you do a drag back and then do a low driven. Could be back, you never know.
Well, is it drag back just R1? Hold R1 and then...
So there's two. Or you can do L1, R1 and then right analog stick. So there's two ways you can do it. L1, R1's a bit more consistent, especially on alternate controls. I'd recommend that.
And you move the left stick, not the right stick, because right stick is obviously skill moves, isn't it? But actually, it's not a skill move; it's like a movement.
Because you can do a half drag back where you just do it for like a split second, or you can go like backwards, but you can also go to the left and to the right. So you do like L1, R1, left analog stick to the left, then you go either flick to the left or to the right. Think of it like a McGee, like a stop and go, but with just the drag back as well.
Yeah, it's quite nice because it feels sort of fairly natural, right? Like in terms of the movement, it's kind of what the player does on the pitch, and I always quite like it when the skill move reflects, like the skill move controls reflect the player's movement, which actually props to whoever works that out, because I often think in the game, skill moves do often reflect, like the motion you're doing often does reflect what the player does, which is, considering there are so many of them as well, it's quite impressive. Anyway. On to maybe some less impressive things, which is the fact that EA have not looked at, they've looked at AI defending, but they've not done anything about AI defending in this patch. And I think that was the biggest maybe frustration. Obviously, the goalkeeper movement thing was exciting enough to people, I think, that it probably didn't get as negative a reception as it could have done. But EA saying in that patch note, I guess, that they are looking at AI defending, but have not made any changes to AI defending. And it's quite clear that this is a big frustration at the moment, right, Josh? And I mean, it kind of has been since the start of the game, but obviously because they did that initial patch, which because they kind of patched the game over time to make, they made manual defending a bit better, right? But it still felt like people are reliant on AI defending to some extent, and things like second man press is very strong. The defensive shape's very tight, and people are still frustrated by it. But we're not seeing a patch.
Yeah, and it's interesting that they kind of did a November recap, like feedback update, about 10 days ago now, and it was essentially an update telling us there are updates coming, and it didn't kind of say exactly what was going to happen. It did say that goalkeeper movement would be less effective in an upcoming patch. The the patch that we just got was kind of done the holiday patch. It like had branding and everything. So I was kind of expecting like a little bit more from it than just, oh, we're going to nerf keeper movement and the drag back will be a bit better. You know, and even in that, they said there'll be an update to AI coming soon. But like the next patch they've said in that is going to be January. Now, it's worth saying that kind of like what Neil was alluding to earlier, where if you say to your random FC player, what's your feelings on keeper movement? Do you like it? Do you not like it? The response is going to differ depending on people's understanding of what keeper movement actually is. It's going to differ depending on what level of player they are. You know, how many wins they get in champs. Do they even play champs? Like that, their response is going to change on that. There will be people who play this game who just thought their opposition keepers were being like helped by the game because they didn't even know that goalkeeper movement was in it, right? So when you say, do you like AI defending? What is everyone going to say? No, I hate AI defending, because they recognize all the times that it stops their attack, but don't recognize all the times it's helped them defensively. If we completely remove AI defending, effectively all but 2 of your outfield players will be making any kind of movement towards the ball. So like there is an element of AI that needs to be in there. Now, having said that, I feel it's way too strong in its ability to win the ball back. And I think that's where the frustration is right now. It's not necessarily that they defend too tightly. It's more that they are too aggressive with, even with like, I think second man press needs nerfing as well, but even without second man press, it just they're too active on a defensive side of the game, and they sit too deep and too compact when they're not being controlled. And it's weird actually, the friendly tournament that ended yesterday that had no rules, because there's no rules, there's no offside, and so the way that the defenders react to that is to sit even further deeper. They drop even further back. There's actually a level at which they drop further back that makes it a bit easier to play, because you can play a pass into a box into an instant shot, which is kind of the way you have to play against the current kind of drop back. That made that a little bit easier. I just think there's not enough space in the attacking areas. Now, there's 2 ways you can fix that. You can make AI defending worse, which I think is probably going to be the route they go down, or you make attacking better, you make dribbling better. But and that's where I felt like we were at the beginning of this game, was that dribbling felt incredibly crisp and smooth and quick, and your passing was, you know, you could really ping the ball around. And we seem to have lost the ability to do those things, despite there not being an overt change to any of those mechanics. And so the response now is they're going to need to reduce AI defending. I wonder, there is a part of me that wonders if the goalkeeper change is an attempt to make the amount of change they need to make to AI a lot smaller, because just changing AI defending sounds really easy, but it's not like League of Legends where you can just reduce a stat. You know, you can reduce like the damage per second, or you can reduce like the healing percentage. This is like the core on which the majority of the game is built, because as I was saying, like in the games we play, you're only ever controlling 2 players maximum at any one time. So this is the core of the game, is AI defending. So just changing it is massive and requires loads more testing than they usually do. And in the patches we've got on stuff that is just reducing the effectiveness of something, like R1 dribbling, we know that the testing of that isn't great because they're having to revert those things. So they are going to want to take their time over AI defending, and I wonder if that's why goalkeeper movement came first, because I think one of the major pieces of feedback and frustration that I saw was you spend 5 minutes trying to break down the 9 men on the edge of somebody's box, get your shot off, and a little keeper movement, and all that work is undone. And I wonder if that's why we've got the goalkeeper movement change before the AI defending change. The fact that it's a lot more difficult to change the AI defending.
Yeah, you're so right. I think that it could be a very good, well, at least it's a very good way to sort of, improve the experience for people who are complaining about that until that is changed. And as you say, may also allow them to be less aggressive with that. Neil, interested to hear your thoughts on this, but we are quite late for a break. So let's take a break and we'll be back right after this. Hello, and in this break, a quick reminder that the pod is made possible by supporters. The pod didn't used to be weekly. Yes, Foot Weekly wasn't actually weekly for a time. And then someone suggested setting up the Patreon. And since then, the pod has been weekly. And in fact, it's been twice weekly because there is that supporter episode every single week. So if you'd like to catch that episode and keep the podcast going, it's just £3 a month to do so. And you get loads in return. And there are perks higher than that, including access to the Discord too. So if you're interested and would like to support the podcast, then head over and search Support Foot Weekly. Go to Patreon and it's very easy to sign up. If you are a supporter keeping the podcast going, then a huge thank you for doing so. And if you do consider supporting, a huge thank you too. Right, let's jump back into the pod. Hello, welcome back after the break. So, as promised, Neil, let's come to you. How are you feeling about the fact they have not touched AI defending? And do you think it's like in a really kind of desperate situation, or do you think it's fine to just, see how things go after the goalkeeper patch and let's see in January and go from there?
So me personally, I thought they went the complete wrong way. I feel like if you're going to do this goalkeeper thing, you should have done it slightly, introduced the AI patch, and then they could have nerfed it more if needed. That would have been step one. But there's a simple solution. If anyone from EA is watching this, just increase the defensive width. Because we know they can't fix AI attack because the players never make runs by themselves, so we're forced to use player lock. I mean, the defensive AI is a whole saga because you make it too defensive. People who can't defend will be happy, but people want to play like us. We can't. Who wants to sit against the game, breaking down the entire defense, the entire game? It's not like real life. The 90 minutes is one mind against one mind. All they have to do is just increase the defensive width because you said teammate contain, Josh, right? Most of that issues will be resolved without touching teammate contain if the defense width was higher because you can just pass the ball around. It's then the skill for you to then switch player. If you're talking about, for example, you can't get through and you can't defend, defensive width would solve all of that without breaking the game. That would be the only solution that they can do that won't break anything else. Now, does that mean that they may have to go 5%, 5%, 5%, 5% until they find a solution? Potentially. But this defensive AI patch, let's say, comes out end of January. That's when historically they come out, right? Like 20th of January. The problem is, if that messes up, they have to do another patch. So we're going to be more than halfway through the cycle, I suppose you could say. Well, it depends. I would say it's more of an 8-month cycle compared to a year. But let's say an 8-month cycle, you've already gone halfway through and the game's not even in a state ready to be played. So this is the big problem. I feel like they're just going the complete wrong way. They're adjusting things that, with all due respect, they don't need to adjust. They should just increase defensive width. But as you said, it's a whole can of beans. If you, like, for me, if I had to say what I think of defensive AI, the defensive AI should track. There's some issues with tracking they need to fix. And maybe there's some slight movement in terms of repositioning. But apart from that, AI shouldn't do anything else. I understand for Division 7 to 8 player, they can't do that. That's why if you just keep it as it is and increase the defensive width, it would be the solution. But I guarantee you, the way that they're going is probably going to be the wrong thing. And even if they do get it right, I guarantee there's going to be so many other issues that are tied to that issue. So I don't know. I thought they should have done something now, even if it was just a little bit, like a few percent. They could have said, we're going to test some things out, like R1 control sprint. They brought it, they nerfed it. They could have said, let's just test something first. But now we're going to be, it could be 2 more could be 3 patches until this game is right. And then that's 𝘵ci𝗰𝗰𝘀𝘁 around the corner.
Yeah, I bet they were concerned about if they did make a change, though, it having a really adverse effect. And then, obviously, Christmas is probably not the best time to be trying to correct that and release a patch in the meantime. So maybe they're like, at least if we do it in January, we'll have a chance to correct it if we need to. But yeah, sorry, Josh, you were going to come in.
No, it's okay. I like my wonder in it is, even if they got it right from our perspective, is how much feedback they get that they got it wrong. Because like what we see as being a good change, people don't give the game long enough to breathe. And I think that's been the issue this year, to be honest. Like, I don't think day one gameplay was really that bad or that far away from something that could have been really enjoyable. But I think there was adverse reactions. And, it was interesting. EA did a stream after the holiday patch came out. I can't remember if it was yesterday or the day before, in which the gameplay dev said, we haven't touched AI defending. And that may be true, and it may just be that it's the way people set up. But I tell you, it feels different. It feels like there's been a change. And, they said, people are using better players. Great. But if it's just better players that's making AI defending too good, just reduce the effectiveness of defensive awareness. Just put the kind of shadow patch on defensive awareness and drop it down then you could do it incrementally to see where the right point is. So I don't know. To me, I think even if they got it right, people will complain. And they're in a really difficult situation now where people are we had a conversation before this started about the rainbow flick acrobatic shots and about how overpowered they are. And there is a simple solution, which is that you just make the effectiveness of any acrobatic shot almost zero, and then you can't abuse this mechanic. And this is this thing of fun versus competitiveness. Scoring an acrobatic shot is fun. I remember scoring a scorpion kick in FIFA 13 or something, and it was one of those moments where I think I must have been a uni dorm room at 2 a.m, and me and my mate going absolutely mental because that's what you played for at that point. It was those insane goals. There wasn't that many packs. There wasn't champs rewards at that point. It was, you were playing for those moments, and we've moved so far away from that now where it's let's remove this fun thing because people are abusing it to get a win. And that I think is the real struggle that they're having now in how they build this game. I also wish they had a bit more confidence in the game, in the game that they wanted to make, and not be so reactive to the community at times, because we see it now with the goalkeeper movement. It's just one extreme to the other. That's what the game feels like. And, I felt like we weren't ever going to get close to what we ended up playing last year. And Neil said it before we started, every patch feels like we're just inching closer towards FC 25. And I don't know how that's possible from the point that we started from.
But I would crucially say it feels like we're getting closer to post, when was it? January patch? The midway
post-Jan patch, yes. Yeah.
Not before that, which was, in my opinion, quite significantly worse. At least so far.
Can I say something quickly just on that point before we move on? The thing was, when this game started, it had issues. Don't get me wrong, it was never a perfect game, but I felt like in the last 4 or 5 years, I would say it had the best foundation. And as I said, the ship was sailing in the right direction for the first time. It's kind of like they paper over cracks. They take 2 steps forwards, then 3 steps backwards. And I feel like there was no need. The thing is, as you said, they could adjust defense AI, I'm sure. But there's so many indirects with the code. They might adjust. It's not like a volume knob. You can't just turn it to 75% and that's it. You touch this, it affects that, and that. There's so many dependencies. That's why I think just a simple solution like width, for example, because that's not going to affect anything else. It'll just affect the width. So I feel like if they're worried, just do this incrementally, 5%, as you said. I don't know. I can't believe we're going down this state where we had a very good potential of a game. And I feel like for the past 4 years, they never took that risk ever. This is the first year they took that risk. They did all that effort to take the risk. And now they're just going back. So it's kind of like the first week, we should have enjoyed it more. We should have cherished it more, to be honest. And maybe myself as a content creator, I study the game. I didn't even get to enjoy the game as maybe everyone else did. I was more trying to study the game and understand it. So I don't know. It's a mess, I would say, at this current time.
I don't know. I've long not believed this. The game was so good when it first came out and the first patch ruined it. It's just it's every single year. It happened last year as well, even though I just don't think it was that different. And I think there is a lot of that which comes down to it feeling fresh, to be honest. And also the other thing is people not working out what they need defensively to actually be able to beat their opponent. The fact that there's a huge pace discrepancy between attackers and defenders in the early stages of the game. And there's so many factors that make that first week or so quite different to later. And I don't know. I kind of feel like that one of the biggest changes this cycle was the improvements to manual jockey, basically, where they made it so that you could jockey more similar speed to attackers could move. And I think that was like something that came in that first patch, and that was absolutely needed. I think the game was so skewed towards dribbling, and you see a bigger variety of ways to attack now. So I don't know, like I'm not completely in agreement that the game was like significantly better before the patch. I actually feel like, for me at least, the changes they have made felt fairly logical and not changed the game kind of beyond recognition. Like, it's still, as much as it may have gone back towards last year's game, I still think it's very much different to what we had at the end of last cycle. And also you can tell by like how snappy a lot of and I think it's to do with those responsiveness changes they made in those early patches, but like the snappiness of like passing and also dribbling to some extent is just way more noticeable than it was last cycle. I think there's some debate over whether that's a good thing, because like some of the kind of ping-pongy play that you see doesn't necessarily feel supernatural, but I think it sets it apart quite clearly from last cycle's gameplay, and also reflect, the gameplay, that those passing mechanics were still there in that early stages of the game, but people were dribbling a lot more, I think. At least that's where I saw it. I wanted to bring in what Tom said, actually. Tom wrote into us and said, with the new winter patch notes being dropped, how are people feeling about EA's approach to patches this year? Personally, I was excited about the concept of more regular patches, but it feels like we've ended up with quantity over quality. There's a lot that I feel could use adjusting in this game. It's now been 3 months with the only substantial change being kickoffs. I'm not sure I'd agree with that necessarily, but I'm interested to hear thoughts from, because I guess we've just been talking about how the game has changed, and Tom's suggesting that the game hasn't changed significantly. I mean, how do you feel, Josh, in comparison to last cycle? Do you feel like there have been more changes in this first few months? Do you feel like that it's been the right approach versus previous cycles?
I don't know that we've had more patches than before, and I think maybe it's a combination of what Tom said and what you've just said. If EA had only changed or if the game had only changed in the way that EA said they were changing it, then I would probably agree that they've maybe not done enough in some areas, but the changes that they made were necessary. But I think the problem isn't that the patches have we've got an increased jockey speed. The problem is that, like, the number of now compilations that we've got of bounce backs from tackles or interceptions bouncing off and going back to opponents that really wasn't happening at the beginning of the game. That's not oh, it felt better. No, it's factual. You can go back and watch those early games, and if you made a tackle, it just stuck at your player's feet, and that's not happening anymore. So it's those things that I think are frustrating people. I would agree with Tom that I would sooner have inflection points in the cycle instead of like constant updates. I think the game needs time to breathe, unless there's something like really catastrophically wrong. And maybe you could say that kickoffs and corners have been kind of were the two biggest issues, I think, when the game came out. Maybe jockey speed defensively as well. But I do think I think the biggest skill gap when the game came out was your ability to defend and how well you could defend manually. And so that I think is where, though, the changes that they made to jockey speed was like, okay, let's just give people a little bit more help now defensively. But if they'd have just fixed kickoffs and then let the game breathe for another month, 6 weeks, like, what changes would have felt necessary at that point, I think would have been different to what people were saying 1 week later. And so that's where I feel like it's not necessarily that they haven't patched enough. I think because they're trying to get these quick patches out all the time, because we're listening and live feedback and all of this, I think they're almost like trying to find something they can change quickly and making that change without necessarily giving people time to learn how to counter it or utilize it better. So I do agree with the point that I would sooner have quality patches over a quantity of patches, and that maybe actually the game changing in a significant way every 2.5 months would actually be quite good for the cycle. It would keep the game feeling a little bit fresher. You kind of would play the game, get used to it, and then, okay, season 3, we've got a big update with a new patch. Now you've got to kind of learn a new game. And people go, I don't want to learn a new game because I've spent all this time, doing evos or building players. But everyone loves the start of a new cycle. So like, I think there would be an element of that where it would keep it a little more fresh, even if it wasn't kind of. I'm not talking about significantly changing the game, just those like, okay, we saw that maybe dribbling was a bit too overpowered, so we've reduced that, we've increased passing. I'm not saying specifically for this game, but just those kinds of changes where it's like, I don't know, a little bit more, where they've had time to test it, they've had time to implement it, they've taken the feedback that really was an issue that filters through over a longer period of time and really implemented proper fixes.
Yeah. I think that's a very fair point. And Neil, what about you? We'll move on from patches after this, I promise, to those who want
to be honest, this is when I said the first week, normally when the game comes every week, it feels the same. Like, I think anyone that's a veteran of the game knows, like, the basis of the gameplay always apply. But this was the first year in 5 years that I genuinely said on day one the game was it wasn't a perfect game, but it was in a good shape, that it needed a few more adjustments and the right direction, it would have been a good game. That's my opinion. And what I meant to say earlier is they took all this risk listening to the feedback. They made the game less AI, okay? Well, apparently they wanted to, whatever they wanted. The thing was, they took all this risk, but now it's just gone into nowhere. So why go through all this effort to just throw it away? Like, as you said, let the patch breathe. When the game came out, there was issues. Overhead kicks were a big thing. Anyone in the top tier divisions, it was out in the first week, honestly. There's first time through ball. There's so many issues, but that jockey patch, I feel like it was needed, but not in the capacity they did it. They should have incrementally did it, like 5%, and they should have got rid of the stuff which was overpowered, like the kickoffs. They could have worked on that adjustment and slightly increased the buff for the jockey, because they knew that over time that players are going to get better, the jockey playstyle, and I think it needed a buff, players moving too quick, and that was it. Instead, they started controlling on this controlled sprint where 90% of the community know the difference between controlled sprint and left stick dribbling. So that was issue number one. And then they ended up at that point just spiraling out of control, in my opinion. That's when everything. So when what was said earlier by Tom, does a game feel different? I think it feels astronomically different. That first day one gameplay, I think, was a very good base. I think people needed time to adjust. And people who I spoke to are like, oh, I hate it. They changed their mind. They gave it a month and they said, you know what? They changed their mind. And people keep saying, oh, there's realistic gameplay. Okay, there had to be some changes, but no one is playing this game. Like in real life, when you pass the ball around trying to break down the box, it's 11 players against 11 players. It's not one mind against one mind. It's not like, it's not unified as what we were playing in a simulator. Do people want 1-0 games back? I don't understand. So I understand the score lines are not really accurate representation, but I felt they should let the game go, adjust the jockeying, not too much, fix the issues, fix the kickoff and stuff like that, and then do the basic things like, okay, maybe this is a bit of an issue. Let's give it some time and let's do a slight adjustment. Like goalkeeper movement, like now. There was no need to completely obliterate it. They could have done one step, not 5 steps. I think that's what the issue is. Working on the wrong stuff and going too extreme when they don't need to. Why do they go too extreme on goalkeeper movement? But like other stuff, they do like very minuscule changes. It makes no sense. So I don't know. That's kind of my opinion.
I think it's fair that and I think what's coming across here is from both of you is we need balancing changes to be kind of slow and gradual, things that really affect the balance of the game, things that are actually kind of like abusable mechanics. Those things need to be patched quickly. And I think that is something that they just don't seem to have quite done over these last few months. And they went, as you said, they went extreme on something like goalkeeper movement, which isn't, some people say it is, but it isn't an abusable mechanic. Whereas it took them a while to fix things that I think we all know needed to go, and they really I guess maybe they tried with the kickoff thing and just did it wrong to be fair, but I did take way too long to sort out, and obviously it got worse as a result of the patch. So yeah, I think that's probably a good way to kind of wrap up the patch section, but maybe we should ask listeners and viewers, of course, to send in their thoughts on how EA have approached patches. EA are listening to feedback, so they'll maybe listen to your comments in the comments section on YouTube, but send those in there, and we will definitely cover those. Right, let's take a break, and we will be back to talk about some actual gameplay tips from Neil right after this. Hello, and welcome back after the break. So we promised some gameplay tips from Neil. Why else would we get him on? Obviously to talk about the patch, but also to give advice. And I spotted this question from Parky. He says, someone who's terrible at triggering runs and defensively with switching, what's the best or more likely to help me out depth and style to run? Is it, say, balanced with counter? Is there anything around the kind of defensive and offensive approach that would help? But also, I guess, any other tips around those questions?
So I think for the depth, I think it's going to sound a bit contradictory, but like obviously don't go drop back. I mean, especially in this year, a first time shot inside the box is so deadly. So don't go drop back. People think that's a good one. Don't go there. I think balanced is probably the best. And I would say stay within the realm of balance and then choose what width you want to go. So don't go to high. I normally play
depth,
60.
You mean, sorry, just to be clear.
Depth. Sorry, depth. Sorry, should I say? Apologies. 60 is the highest you can go. And beyond that, you'll go into high. So I would say go around that because your team still sit high up where you can still defend, but they don't sit so high up where they're pressing and running out of position like what you would with high, or they won't not track the run in behind. So high is the way to go. I would still recommend counter. People say, oh, should I use short passing? Professional players use it. The problem is that professional players, they use a lot of player locks. Short passing brings players towards you, but it's fine. But you need to learn how to trigger every single movement. So I would say either stay on balanced or counter. Even though you might think it was not helping you right now, counter will probably help you overall. And I understand that you want players to come towards you, but realistically, you want those players getting behind. So I'd say when you get the ball, just focus on pressing the L1 button. Just always look forward. That way you can't trigger a defender by mistake, but just trigger an attacking player. Even if they run offside, it doesn't make a difference because they'll be unmarked when they come back on side. They will stretch a defensive line. So that's what I would say. So go about 60 depth, and then I would say use counter or balanced, and then just focus on basic L1 triggers. Don't try anything special. Whoever's in front of you, trigger it. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter. Just get them running, understand the movement, understand what they do.
It's also maybe worth noting that, like, if you do send a player on a run and you're like, oh, that was the wrong thing to do. If you press L1 to do that, you can also just press R1, RB to call the player back. So, you know, I think that can be a thing. People are like, oh, I keep like sending players on runs and I'm not necessarily doing the right thing. Well, you can kind of correct your mistake, I suppose, by calling them back. Because obviously it can actually be really frustrating if you send a player on a run and they disappear because you don't have a passing option or whatever. But yeah, you can just call them back.
Just one thing on that quickly.
Yeah. Go on.
I would say if you're not confident with that, just wait for the player to go offside and then run back. So if you trigger your centre back, God forbid by mistake, you're trying to trigger your fullback, just pass the ball around, go back to the goalkeeper. That centre back will run offside and then come back on. So that way, if you're not comfortable with triggering someone, then trying to press R1 and bring in the wrong player, that's what I would say is a fail-safe.
Yeah. Josh, anything to add in terms of triggering runs, you know, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I would say definitely counter for build-up style. If you're someone who doesn't trigger runs often or use player locks, then definitely counter. 1-2 through balls, or like just 1-2s in general, is a really good way to get some attacking movement as well. That doesn't require you to kind of think about where you're aiming when you're triggering the run. You know that the player you've got who's making the first pass is going to be the one making the run. And then
to do that, Josh, it's hold L1 or LB and
yes,
press pass,
and
right?
just press pass. So if you hold L1 or LB and just press pass, then you'll see your player will just start making a forward run from where they are. So you know it's a good way to get around a defender, or usually it's a midfielder is what you'd be using it, and that's a way to get some kind of attacking movement going. On counter, your players will make a lot more forward movements, and so if you do feel like you want to bring somebody short, then it's. I would say, like, with the way that passing is in this game, you don't really need somebody running towards you. You've always got the ability to turn out from the situation you're in. It's okay to kind of reset the play at times. I know with kind of how good the AI is defensively, with how deep people go and sit, there's this kind of desire to play incredibly quickly, but sometimes you can try and play too quickly and try and force things that aren't there. And actually being relaxed on the ball is going to be more beneficial than like panicking trying to progress it forward, because if you have a quick turnover of the ball, that's usually where you're going to then struggle on the counter attack, because you know, and you'll feel like I can't get out, and then you'll start making kind of errors defensively because you're trying to dive in, you're trying to kind of get the ball back because you've lost it and you don't feel like you're having any time on the ball. So, in fact, I was speaking to Japes a few weeks ago and he said, like, on both sides of the ball, whenever it turns over, I just take a deep breath. Like that thing of just trying to be a bit more relaxed when you're playing and make it be your opponent that's making the mistakes. I think that's kind of, especially if you're kind of not comfortable in attack, there will be passing options. Even if you have to pass it backwards, you can then move the ball back forwards again. And actually, sometimes moving backwards is the best way to draw somebody out, to make their team kind of move out from that deep set position. And because you're going backwards, they kind of feel like, oh, they're in retreat almost, and they kind of come out to try and win the ball back, and that can pull somebody out of position. You can start taking advantage of that. So just, I think being a little bit more relaxed as well on the ball is important.
And I would say, like, I use cool player short, so R1 RB a lot more than I use the run trigger on LB at L1. I guess I do player lock actually to, request through balls and stuff like that. So that's going to be one of the reasons. But genuinely, I think if you aren't someone who's often using the cool player short, give it a try more. It's much safer in a way than triggering runs, which can cause a player to run far, far away and not be an option because it will pull the player short. It can sometimes congest where the ball is, but you can always play the pass backwards or whatever to circulate the ball around a bit more to find somewhere where it's less congested. But like, I think it is like a really valuable thing that people don't use probably enough. Just to move us on to talking about the player switching side, we don't have too much time, but I would, and I've said this before, suggest reducing the right stick switching sensitivity. Something I did a while back, and I've kept mine on, I think, about 2. I find it really, really helpful, and it's meant that I do a lot more right stick switching than I used to because I'm much more confident. I know where that switch is going to go because all we want is consistency, as people say. And if you have that consistency in terms of your right stick flicking, combine that obviously still with a bit of LB, L1 switching just to switch the right player, especially if you want a second man press or whatever and switch into them, things like that. But it does, I find, like really, really help doing that. Just especially, I guess you can sort of edge it up over time if you get more confident, but I think it's very good on low sensitivity. And I'd also say that if you, I think that, well, the other thing to add is that you have to just force yourself not to use L1 or LB if you're going to learn to play a switch really effectively with the right stick. It's just too much of a habit for a lot of people to use that L1 LB. And once you kind of, I guess, force yourself not to, you'll get better at it. But yeah, I think it's something that takes time and like a concerted effort. It's very easy to just be L1 LB switching all the time. I'm sure Josh was shaking his head, so I guess maybe he has some alternative advice.
No, I agree with you. You just said flicking your stick and edging in the same sentence, and my child brain just couldn't quite handle it.
Well, maybe if that's how people think about it, they'll be more inclined to try right stick flicking. Yeah, right stick flicking. Anyway, Neil, anything on player switching? I've given the advice, but I am not the expert.
I swear by ball relative. I think on the elite plus level, player relative is better for pressing, but I think ball relative is the most consistent way. Like if you're strong on right stick switching, it's the easiest thing. Just go into a kickoff, get 2 controllers, and just practice moving along. You cannot mess up. You literally flick to the right side of the ball. That's what I would say. The key with right stick switching is you got to switch earlier than you think. So whatever you're doing right now, you have to switch earlier. Go back and record your gameplay and you'll know what I'm talking about. You have to switch earlier. Inside the box, I think you have to use the L1 switch or LB because you don't have that much time. Of course, trying to select a CDM or something like that, you need to switch early. But I would recommend ball relative. Put the switching on 5 and think of it like a blanket statement. The higher you go, the more manual it is, the lower it is, the more assisted it is. But with ball relative, I feel like it's very hard to mess up because with player relative, you flick to the top right, there could be 5 players in contention. Whereas in ball relative, it's just a player on the top right hand side of the ball. So it's not going to select your left back by mistake if you try selecting your CDM. It's always going to go to your CDM in that state.
Great. Yeah, I think it's basically both of the advice we've given, one for ball relative, one for player relative, both of those bits of advice are about making it more consistent and like easier for you to get the play you want. And I think that is the biggest thing. Like, try those things, see if that helps, and then just start using that right stick a lot more for defending than you have been previously, and you'll get there in the end. But it's a bit like precision shooting. There's definitely a learning period with these things, like a significant learning period for these things. So that is probably how we'll end the podcast, actually. So thank you very much to Neil for coming on, for sharing your advice and also talking extensively about the patch. If people want more advice, they can check out your guides, of course. And also you have a Patreon where people can get advice via, more direct coaching advice, I guess.
Yep, thank you very much for having me on. You can, of course, always see my YouTube channel for any videos that I do. And if you want to take your gameplay further, I got my FC score, guaranteed improvement, or guaranteed improvement, or refund your money after 1 month. Always get that bit messed up.
Nice. And then to Josh, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, it's been good to have you as well.
Yes, it's been good here, and glad I could make it after nearly getting into a fight at Mumford & Sons concert last night.
not where you expect to get.
It's the rowdiest of crowds, honestly.
Yeah. And
my trilby nearly fell off.
And actually, I should just say, you've reminded me, I don't want the YouTube audience to get rowdy. I know I did say that we would bring in the comments made by the YouTube commenters. I think it was about a week ago on the last gameplay version of the podcast, I think. It hasn't really fitted into this episode to talk about what was mentioned there, but we will fit it in at some point. In fact, it might be on next week's content episode, so look out for that. And we do appreciate your comments. Keep commenting, keep subscribing, of course, keep liking. It really does help out. And of course, if you want an extra episode every single week, then you can become a supporter. It's just £3 a month. You get double the podcast content, including this week's content episode, which was, of course, about Black Friday, summing that up. And it was pretty interesting. So check that out if you are a supporter. And if you're not, consider subscribing or becoming a supporter. And a big thank you, of course, to all those supporters keeping the podcast going, including those icon patrons.
Dave B, Darren W, Hugh J, Rob W, Josh R, Ralph, Brian, Michael B, Adam R, Make B, Michael H, Rob S, Michael K, Neil P, Jake S, Tom B, Alex M, Damon H, L, James B, Sam K, The Shirt Locker, Lee A, Chris G, Mark M, Dom P, Rob P, Roger D, Waterman, Also Ran, and Juicy. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, Hugh J, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato Foot for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add though. Ultimate Team is a bit like life really. It has its many ups and downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to thecalmzone.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to thecalmzone.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.